But I'm getting up from my desk here, walking away the desk behind me, as are some of the television studios, and I'm coming to have a chat with David Waddell, who's our chief picture producer. He's working on BBC World TV today. Now, I've just interrupted a colleague who had a question for him by coming over to speak about Outside Source. I just want to continue. Well, first, David, perhaps you could describe to our listeners where you're sitting. It's quite a setup here.
Well, I'm right in the centre of the newsroom. I'm sat in the midst of the BBC World Television news team and right next to us as well as the BBC Domestic News channel. So we work very closely in this role with people from across the newsroom, but particularly the continuous news television outlets and also our on-demand online services as well to get all the right pictures on.
That's about 7 screens, I think I'm counting here as I sit down with you. But we're talking with Paul Adams about the migrant and refugee crisis. What are you thinking about when you choose images or videos to try and tell that story?
Well, when we tell the story, of course we can do it with words, and we're able to do that on radio. On television, we've got to do everything we can to illustrate it. And I've just thought of a few factors that we need to try and meet, or as many as possible. One is availability. We can't use pictures if we don't have them, and that too often is a real struggle. But within the pictures themselves, we want to get as much movement into them as possible. It's great to see the scale of a crisis or whatever story we're covering. Getting some emotion in there is good too, and if we can illustrate some kind of surprise or shock value in the pictures, that's a way of really communicating the story. I think particularly of some pictures we've had in the migrant crisis, some really iconic ones in recent days. We've seen people scrambling to get onto trains in the town of Tovarnik in Croatia, and there's been many people trying to squeeze not just through the doors but through the windows as well, and many of your listeners will recognise those pictures if they've been watching the coverage.
Absolutely, I want to come back to those in just a moment, but with that you talk about emotion, surprise, shock. You can't show everything, so how do you decide what is a balanced representation of what's out there?
Well, we absolutely have to be editorially balanced. If there are 2 or more sides to the story, then we've got to find a way of illustrating not just the different locations, but also the different events. And what we try and do, rather than tell a story only with the pictures, we try and back up the way the story is told through the scripts by providing pictures that meet all the different script angles. And this is a story, this migrant story has got so many different locations and also events, and we've got to try and illustrate them all.
Well, let's come back to that picture that you mentioned about the Croatian train station, because on social media, as we talk about this, many have said to me they feel that all they're seeing are pictures of young men. And then the debate turned to, are there other women there or families that we're not seeing? And kind of getting to that issue of how do you show the full story?
I think there's possibly an element of truth in there being more men than women or children. And that may be born of the fact that there are some migrants, economic migrants, as well as refugees, and perhaps economic migrants are more men than women, perhaps. We just don't know the truth of that. And in my own experience, I'm seeing many families, many women, many children, many men. And but I think, again, if we go back to that train example, the people that were squeezing through the windows of the trains were mostly men. But what you didn't see in those pictures, and we did edit and use elsewhere, were pictures of women and children, their family members perhaps, being ushered through the doors of different carriages. So the men that were squeezing through the windows, the ones that were used in the headline pictures and in the top of the news packages, they're astonishing pictures and we have to use them, but they're only part of that story.
And today, David, what is it that you're working on? What is the story that you're deciding what pictures, images, video to pick?
Well, once again, as it has been for much of the last month, it's the migrant story. Today we're focusing on Croatia again. Most of the pictures we've had are from a place called...
it's probably Opatovac.
Opatovac, yeah. So we've got lots of people at makeshift camps trying to break through police lines where they're being processed and so on. So we've got hundreds of people there. But again, I'm looking out for pictures from across Europe and people who haven't reached Europe yet.
Thanks very much for speaking to us. That is our chief picture producer, David Waddell, just bringing you really behind the scenes when it comes to some of those pictures. Of course, so many of the images that were so striking for our listeners and our viewers to the BBC.